The U.S. and Canada seeing new trade tensions as Washington signals a tougher approach on tariffs and Ottawa's ties with China. Joining us right now is Michael Froman, Council on Foreign Relations President and a former U.S. Trade Representative. There's been lots of talk, as you know, about what's happening now between the U.S. And Canada, what that relationship ultimately looks like, but maybe more importantly, what Mark Carney said last week. And I'm curious whether you think Mark Carney's speech was either one for the ages and is what is actually about to happen here, or is a negotiating ploy, if you will, as it relates to tariffs and trade?
Well, I think Prime Minister Carney's speech was an important speech at Davos for laying out what was on everybody's mind, which is that there has been a rupture in the way that we've done business normally in the global trading system, and that middle-sized countries like Canada need to figure out what their approach is going to be in that context. You know, for Canada, it has meant de-risking from the United States, beginning to explore other ways of diversifying its markets. But I'm afraid Canada is sort of condemned by geography and by history. And there's so much integration north-south between the United States and Canada that I think its ability to truly diversify away from the United States is really at the margins, not in some fundamental way.
And this idea, though, that we are sending our great neighbor into the hands of our great enemy, China, is that happening? Is that real?
Well, I think globally what's happening is that countries are reevaluating and have an incentive to further their relations with other countries. It's not just Canada. The EU finally concluded a trade agreement with India. It's been on the table for 20 years. And I think what's happened is that what the Trump's approach to trade has created an incentive for them to finally get these things done. Same thing between the EU and Mercosur, the trading arrangement in Latin America and South America. And so it's not that we're sort of driving them into the hands of others. It's that we're creating an incentive for them to finally kind of finish the work of diversifying their trade relations with others.
And so how ultimately, is that going to be a loss to us? Is that a win? I mean, one of the things that we've heard from the administration is that they want Europe to be stronger, they would say, and to make their economy stronger, in part so they can help pay for some of the military and defense efforts for NATO and the like.
I think if this gives Europe the push it needs to deal with the reforms that everyone in Europe knows needs to be done, the Draghi report, the Letta report, all of these reports have been out there for years saying, here are the things that Europe needs to do to become more productive, to become more innovative. But they all involve difficult decisions, oftentimes cutting across nationalisms, where French nationalism, German nationalism comes out, and it's hard for them to overcome that. This may be an extra push from the outside that actually gets that done, and that would be a good thing and would help strengthen Europe. I do think China is benefiting from the fact that that other countries are feeling the need to de-risk from the United States and to look for other partners. I don't think it's irredeemable, and I don't think they're going to find China to be a good trading partner over the long run. I think they still prefer to be closer to the United States, but I think China is benefiting from this moment of instability.
And so, what's your? I mean, throw on top of that, whatever's happening now with South Korea. You saw that news just 24 hours ago. Where do you think all of this stands, or is it just something that's a moving jump ball for the next 3 years, if not longer?
It's hard to predict what this administration, this president's going to do 3 years from now, let alone even 2 months or a month from now. I do think the use of tariffs as the answer to everything is beginning to sort of lose some of its oomph. With Korea, he announced he's going to raise tariffs from 15 to 25%, and then a day later said, but we'll work something out. And I think people don't really know how much credibility to put behind the tariff threat. The tariffs on on Canada, he announced 100% tariffs on Canada. There is no plan for that. There is no announcement of how the 100% tariffs are going to apply. Is it going to apply to trade that takes place under the USMCA free trade agreement or not? Will there be exceptions? I think they're just hoping that the announcement effect will bring Prime Minister Carney and President Trump back to the table in a way, and they'll reach some sort of accommodation.
What was your takeaway from Davos last week? I think people are trying to make sense of all of the different, the whiplash of the possibility of military action on Greenland, then a deal on Greenland. I don't know how much you make of that deal, and then sort of underneath it, what was either being said in the hallways about everything else.
One thing that came out clearly, Andrew, was that Davos was certainly President Trump's show. In the anticipation of his speech on Wednesday, there was a lot of anxiety around the town, with people wondering, was he going to announce military action to take Greenland or not? There was a sense of relief that he took that off the table in his speech. Also, a little bit of a sense of despair that we were in this place where, where all eyes were focused on something like Greenland, when we weren't talking about Russia, Ukraine, or Venezuela, or Iran, or China, the U.S.-China relationship, arguably the most important relationship in the world. Lots of issues being pushed off the agenda because of the particular preoccupation of the president right now. So a lot of concern about that as well. But this was certainly Donald Trump's show, and it shows that even as much as other countries would like to move away from the United States, they are completely preoccupied with what goes on here in the United States.